me tell you guys a story that happened last summer. Something that I still don't understand. I've never been the kind of person to believe in ghost stories. Growing up, I was the one who laughed when people claimed they heard whispers in the woods or saw eyes glinting in the dark. But after what happened last summer, I don't laugh anymore, and I haven't been camping since. It started with a group chat. Me, my best friend Evan, his girlfriend Mia, and my cousin Tyler. We'd all been talking about getting out of town for a few days, something off-grid. No cell service, no work calls, no social media. Just the four of us. A tent, a campfire, and the stars. Evan found the place. He says his uncle has mentioned an old campsite deep in the Whistler Pines forest, a few miles past the last ranger station. Apparently it wasn't on most maps anymore. The trails were overgrown, and the park had stopped maintaining it years ago, after a string of accidents. He said that part with air quotes. We all laughed, but looking back, I should have paid more attention. We loaded up on Friday afternoon, 2 tents, enough food for the weekend, a cooler of cheap beer, and a Bluetooth speaker that barely held a charge. It was supposed to be one of those classic summer trips. A few stories, a few laughs, maybe a dip in the lake, nothing more. The drive took almost 5 hours. By the time we reached the gravel road leading into the forest, the sun was already bleeding orange through the trees. The GPS had long since lost signal, and the path ahead looked barely wide enough for the car. Branches scraped along the windows, the sound like fingernails across the glass. At one point, we even joked about turning back, but Evan insisted we were close. Finally, we reached a small clearing, a wide patch of grass surrounded by towering pines that seemed to swallow the last bite of daylight. It was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual chirping of crickets and birds seemed muted, but we shrugged it off. It had been a long drive, and we were exhausted. We set up camp, got a small fire going, and cracked open the beers. Tyler started telling ghost stories, the kind you'd hear around any campfire. A woman in white, a car crash, the sound of knocking at your tent at night. They were good for a laugh, until Mia said something that made us all pause. She said, "You know what's weird? There aren't any stars." We all looked up, and she was right. The sky should have been full of them. We were miles from the city, but it was just black, like a sheet pulled tight across the sky. No stars, no moon, nothing. Evan said maybe it was cloud cover, but when I looked around, I couldn't see a single cloud, just this deep, unnatural darkness that seemed to press against the edge of clearing. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I woke up to go to the bathroom. I stepped out of the tent, flashlight in hand, and froze. There was someone standing at the tree line. At first, I thought it was Tyler messing with me. He had a habit of doing that. But the figure was too tall. Its shoulders were too narrow. And it wasn't moving. Just standing there, watching. I called out softly, "Hey, Tyler, quit screwing around." No answer. The figure shifted slightly, and I swear even from across the clearing, I could hear the sound of its breath, slow, wet, like it was struggling to inhale. Then before I could react, my flashlight flickered and went out. When I got it back on, the figure was gone. I scanned the trees, the grass, the tent. Nothing. Just silence. I told myself it was my imagination. It had to be. But when I crawled back into the tent, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There were wet footprints, leading from the flap of the tent to where I'd been lying. And they weren't mine. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still see that shape in the trees. Tall, still, like a shadow that forgot to move when the light changed. I didn't tell the others right away. I didn't want to sound paranoid. We were miles from civilization, and I figured if I said I saw someone in the woods, the trip would be over before it began. When morning came, it was like the forest was pretending nothing happened. The air was crisp, the sunlight filtered through the pines, and the birds were actually chirping again. For a second, I wondered if I'd just dreamed the whole thing, but then I noticed something. The footprints were off. Not just dried up or smudged, gone, like they'd never been there at all. Tyler was making coffee on the camp stove while Mia brushed her hair, still half asleep. Evan was unpacking his fishing gear, ready to hit the lake. I decided to keep my mouth shut. Maybe I'd imagined it after all. We spent most of the day hiking around the area. The trail were barely there, just faint paths winding between the trees that all looked the same. At one point, we found an old wooden sign half rotted and lying in the dirt. You could still make out the words burned into it. Whistler Pines Public Campground, closed. The closed part had been carved in deep, like someone wanted to make sure nobody missed it. Tyler joked that maybe it was closed because the bears were unionizing. We laughed, but something about that sign stuck in my mind. The wood around it looked burned, like it had been part of the fire for a long time ago. And the air around that area felt colder, heavier somehow, like the sun didn't reach that part of the forest anymore. That night, we made dinner over the fire, instant noodles and hot dogs. Mia put on the same music through the tiny Bluetooth speaker, and we tried to make the best of it. For a few hours, it actually felt normal. We were laughing, drinking, swapping stories, until the fire started to die down. And Tyler asked, "Did any of you hear that?" We went quiet. All I could hear was the soft crackle of the fire and the faint hum of insects. Then, it came again. A low whistle from somewhere in the trees. 3 notes, almost like someone was calling for a dog. Except, It wasn't any tune, I recognised. It had this strange, broken rhythm to it. Evan called out, probably just the wind, but it didn't sound like the wind. The notes were too deliberate. Mia said she thought she saw movement between the trees, but when I shined my flashlight, there was nothing there. No animals, no branches moving, just darkness. We tried to shake it off. Eventually, one by one, we turned in for the night. That's when it happened. It must have been around 3 in the morning when I woke up. The air in the tent was freezing. My breath was fogging up in front of me. I could hear the trees swaying, the occasional snap of a branch, and then I heard it. A faint, steady sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from outside the tent. At first I thought maybe it was just a branch hitting the fabric, but it was too rhythmic, too deliberate. I held my breath, straining to listen. Tap, tap, tap. Then a pause. And after a few seconds, the sound changed. Knock, knock, knock. I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't random anymore. It was like someone was knocking right at the entrance of the tent. I whispered for Evan, but his sleeping bag was empty. So was Mia's. I froze, scanning the dark, my mind racing. Were they outside? Had they gone to the fire pit? The knocking stopped, and then a voice. Low, raspy, so quiet I almost thought it was in my head. Can I come in? I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The voice was right outside, just inches away through the thin layer of fabric. It sounded like an old man, but there was something off about it. The tone was wrong, like someone trying to sound human, but missing the mark. Then all at once, I heard footsteps, heavy ones, circling the tent. Leaves crunching, slow, deliberate steps. Whatever it was walking around me. I sat there, clutching my flashlight, too scared to even turn it on. And then suddenly, everything stopped. The footsteps, the wind, the forest, dead silence. I must have stayed like that for at least half an hour before I finally worked up the courage to unzip the tent and peek out. The fire was out. The other tent was still zipped shut, but something was hanging from one of the branches near the campsite. At first I thought it was a piece of fabric. Maybe one of our towers had blown up there. But when I got closer, I saw it wasn't cloth. It was a strip of animal hide, still wet and carved into it, in deep, jagged letters, were 3 words. Stay with us. Morning came too slow. When the first light hit the campsite, it didn't feel like morning at all. Just a weaker kind of darkness. The trees were shrouded in fog, so thick it looked like smoke, curling between the trunks and swallowing our tents from sight. Evan and Mia were sitting by the fire pit when I crawled out of my tent. They both looked pale, like they hadn't slept either. Tyler was still out cold, snoring faintly, oblivious. Evan looked at me and said, "You were up last night, right?" I hesitated. "Yeah, why?" He pointed to the edge of the clearing. There were more footprints, fresh ones, leading right up to the campsite and stopping less than a foot from where Mia had been sleeping. The prints were deep, like whoever or whatever made them was heavy, barefoot, and there was too many to count, like a crowd had been walking circles around us all night. Mia said she thought she heard a whispering sometime after 3 a.m. She didn't want to wake anyone because she thought she was dreaming, but now she wasn't sure. That's when I told them about the knocking and the voice that asked to come in, and about the thing hanging from the branch. Evan didn't say much, just stared into the fog like he was trying to process it. Tyler woke up halfway through and laughed, saying I was trying to freak them out, but I could see it in his face. He was scared too. We decided to pack up a few hours early and head out, but then we started following the path we came in on. It wasn't there anymore. The trail was gone. We tried every direction, north, west, even downhill toward where we thought the road should have been. But it was like the forest had rearranged itself overnight. Every turn led back to the same clearing, the same dead fire pit, the same pines looming like prison bars. Evan climbed one of the smaller hills to look for the car, but all he saw was trees stretching endlessly in every direction. No road, no tire tracks, not even a sign of where we'd parked. By noon we stopped talking. There was this tension between us, not anger, exactly, but something worse, like we all knew we were in trouble but didn't want to admit it. That's when we heard it again, the whistle. 3 notes, same broken pattern as before, but this time it was closer, too close. We froze. Scanning the trees, it was impossible to tell where it was coming from. The sound seemed to bounce between the trunks, echoing from all sides. Then it stopped. A beat later, something whistled back from deeper in the woods, answering it. Evan grabbed the hatchet from the firewood pile and said, "We're leaving. Now." We started walking fast, heading in what we hoped was the right direction. The fog only got thicker. The trees looked identical, repeating, like we were walking through a loop. And then we came across something that made my blood run cold. A fire pit. Still warm, but not ours. There were remnants of burned logs, a few crushed beer cans, same brand we bought, and sitting beside it, a melted plastic flashlight, identical to mine. At first I thought maybe we'd somehow circle back to our own campsite, but then I noticed something carved into one of the nearby trees. It said, Day 2, still lost. The letters looked old, weathered, like they'd been there for weeks. Tyler stared at it and said someone's messing with us. But the way his voice shook took me, he didn't believe that none of us did. We decided to stay, put until the fog lifted, which was probably the worst decision we could have made. By dusk, the air felt wrong again, heavy, still. Even the birds had stopped. We started another fire, smaller this time, trying not to draw attention. Mia was sitting with her back to the woods, staring into the flames, when she froze. I followed her gaze and saw it. Between the trees, maybe 30 feet away, something was standing there. It wasn't a person. It was too tall. Its arms were too long. Its body almost bending with the bark around it. But what made my skin crawl wasn't its shape. It was the sound it made. The same whistle. But this time, it wasn't coming from its mouth. It was breathing. Each exhale formed that broken tree note tune, like the sound was trapped inside of it, trying to get out. Tyler shouted and threw a rock towards it, and the thing jerked its head, not like a reaction, but like it was copying him, mimicking the movement. Then slowly, it turned and stepped back into the trees. We didn't sleep that night. We just sat there, waiting, listening. Every few minutes we'd hear it again, farther away, then closer, circling us, always whistling. Just before dawn, we heard another sound, Mia's voice, coming from the woods. She was sitting right next to me, but her voice was calling from the dark, just beyond the firelight. Evan, Tyler, come here. It was perfect. The same tone, same pitch, but her lips weren't moving. Evan stood halfway up before I grabbed his arm. I whispered, "That's not her." The voice called again, and then overlapping with it came another one. Mine, from the same direction, repeating the same thing. "Evan, Tyler, come here." We sat in silence, staring into the trees until sunrise. And then the light finally broke. There were more footprints leading out of the clearing and into the fog. 4 sets, our size, our shoes, but we hadn't moved. We didn't talk much the next morning. None of us knew what to say. We'd all heard voices. We'd all seen the footprints. And every time one of us even mentioned leaving, it was like the woods got quieter, listening. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it was worse. It rolled between the trees in thick, slow waves. And the deeper you looked into it, the less you could see. It was like the forest didn't want us to know where we were anymore. Tyler was the first to crack. He started pacing, muttering to himself, saying he was done sitting around waiting for some backwoods psycho to mess with us again. He grabbed the hatchet and said he was going to find the car. Evan tried to stop him, but Tyler wasn't listening. He disappeared into the fog, just like that. We yelled for him until our throats hurt, but the sound barely carried past the clearing. After a while, Evan said we should follow him before he got lost for good. So we packed what we could and marked the trees as we went, carving small X's into the dark with Evan's pocket knife. At least there was a plan, except the marks didn't stay. We noticed it maybe 20 minutes in. The first few X's we'd made were gone. Not faded, not scratched out, gone. The bark was smooth again, like the cuts had healed. That's when we found the trail camera. It was strapped to the pine trunk with an old, rusted band, the kind researchers use for tracking wildlife. The lens was covered in dirt, and there was little red light blinking weakly on the side. We thought maybe it belonged to the park rangers, but when Evan pulled it down and checked the back, he found a memory card inside. We didn't have a laptop, but Mia remembered she had a small camcorder in her bag, something she bought to record parts of the trip. It had an SD card slot that fits perfectly. The footage started with static, flickering black and white lines, faint audio distortion, like someone breathing close to the mic. Then it cut to a shot of the clearing, our clearing, same tents, same fire pit, only we weren't in it. The footage looked like it had been taken days ago. The trees looked greener, the fire newer. The camera zoomed slowly towards the tents, and for a moment, I thought maybe someone had just filmed another group camping here before us. Then the first face appeared. It was me, standing beside the tent. But it wasn't from this trip. The clothes I was wearing, I didn't own them anymore. The jacket, the jeans, everything looked a little off. Like an older version of me. Maybe a year or two. And I wasn't moving right. The footage showed me turning towards the camera, but my head kept moving a second slower than my body, like the fame was struggling to keep up. Evan slammed the camcorder shut and muttered, "What the hell is it?" Mia wanted to delete it right away, but I told her to wait. We needed to see the rest. So we kept watching. The video jumped ahead to nighttime. The same clearing, only darker. There was a small fire still burning, and one of the tents was missing. Something was moving just outside the circle of light. Tall, thin, dragging its feet like it didn't know how to walk. The camera panned slowly, and for a split second we saw its face, or something close to its face. It was smooth, no features, just a blank surface where a face should have been. But it had a mouth, or the idea of one, stretching, open wider and wider until the static swallowed but it had a mouth. But it had a mouth, or the idea of one, stretching open wider and wider until the static swallowed the frame. Evan stopped the playback and ejected the card. He threw it into the woods. None of us said a word after that. We kept walking, hoping to find Tyler. But instead, we found something else. A second camera, this one newer, mounted higher in a tree and pointed down at the trail. When we climbed up to check it, there was another memory card inside, labelled Day 3. The same day it was right then. That's when Mia whispered, "It's recording us." We turned. Sure enough, the little red light was blinking again. And as Evan reached up to grab it, the light flickered. Once, twice, and went out. The air went dead silent. Then we heard it. The whistle. Faint at first, somewhere far off. Then closer. Coming from both sides this time. Evan pulled the hatchet from his belt, spinning in circles. "Show yourself," he yelled. But the whistling only got louder. Layers of it, echoing through the trees, like dozens of people trying to match the same broken tune. Mia screamed, pointing behind us. I turned and saw movement through the fog. Dozens of shapes, all standing still. Tall, thin silhouettes just beyond the tree line. Each one holding something in their hands, glinting faintly into the dim light. I thought it was weapons, but when the fog shifted, I realized that they were holding cameras, dozens of old camcorders, phones, tripods, all pointed straight at us, all recording. Then one by one, the red lights started blinking in sync, tiny dots glowing like eyes in the fog. That's when the whistling stopped, and a voice, not one of ours, said, "Day 4. We didn't move for a long time. The woods were silent again, completely still, except for the faint clicking of the camcorders out there in the fog. You could hear their old mechanical shutters adjusting focus, like insects chittering in the dark. Finally, Evan whispered, "We run on 3. He counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. We bolted. Branches clawed at our clothes as we tore through the trees. I didn't know where we were going, only that I had to move. Behind us, the red lights flared to life again, hundreds of them, flickering like embers. And underneath it all, that damned whistle started again. Only this time, it was behind us and ahead of us at the same time. We must have run for an hour before we found another clearing. It looked almost identical to ours, Same shape, same circle of rocks, where a fire might have accepted. There was no smoke, no tents, nothing, just a single object sitting in the centre of the grass. A camcorder. It was on recording. Evan kicked it over, but when it landed on its side, the screen stayed lit, showing us, right then, right there, 3 people standing in a clearing, staring down at the camera. But the longer we looked, the more wrong it got. The footage wasn't quite matching what we were doing. Our movements lagged, our expressions were different. And then in the playback, the other me looked up, not at the lens, but straight into my eyes. That's when I blacked out. When I came to, the sun was rising again. At least I thought it was. But everything looked the same. Same fog, same grey light bleeding through the trees. The only difference was the fire pit. It was back. Our tents were back too. Even Tyler's backpack sitting neatly where he'd left it. Mia was kneeling beside the fire pit, staring at something in the ashes. It was a bone. Small, white, clean, human. She didn't say a word, just stared, her face hollow. Evan looked around, breathing hard. This isn't right. He kept muttering, this isn't right. We were just... He stopped mid-sentence, then said, "What day is it?" I checked my phone. It was dead. Same as before. But when I hit the side button for just a second, the date flicked on the screen before it shut off again. August 12th. That didn't make sense. We'd arrived on August 9th. We'd been out there maybe 2 nights, 3 tops. But now it was August 12th. We'd lost a whole day. Mia said maybe the phone glitched. But when Evan checked his watch, the hands were spinning. Not fast, not random, just turning slowly forward like time itself was skipping. We decided to retrace our steps. Try again to find the road. The forest looked the same in every direction, but we picked one and went. About 20 minutes. We saw something up ahead through the fog. Movements, we thought it was Tyler. But as we got closer, we realised we were walking towards ourselves. 3 figures, walking the opposite direction through the mist. Same clothes, same backpacks, even the same limp Evan had been from twisting his ankle earlier. For a second I thought it was hallucinating, but then the other me looked up and I smiled. That broke us. We ran. When we finally stopped gasping for air, we'd reached another clearing. This one was smaller, ringed with stones, and in the centre on a stump was an old notebook. The pages were yellowed, edges curling. The cover said, "Ranger Log, Whistler Pines." Evan opened it carefully. Most of the pages were blank, but the last few had writing, shaky and desperate handwriting. It read, "Day 1, 4 campers arrive. Day 2, whistling in the woods. Day 3, the copies appeared. Day 4, one left. Repeat. Then underneath that, a new line, carved deep into the paper with something sharp. If you read this, you're already on day 4. We all just stood there, frozen. Mia started crying quietly. Evan slammed the book shut and threw it into the fire pit. But the pages didn't burn, they just turned black and reformed. I saw the same words appear again, letter by letter, like something invisible was rewriting them. That's when we heard footsteps, soft, slow, coming from every direction. We turned and saw ourselves again. At least, versions of us, dozens of them, stepping out of the fog. Some looked terrified, some were bleeding, some were smiling, but they all had our faces. And every one of them was whispering in perfect unison, "Day 4 never ends." Mia screamed and bolted, disappearing into the mist. Evan ran after her. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen, before doing the same. But no matter how far I went, I kept ending back at the same clearing. The same notebook on the stump, the same line etched deeper than before. If you read this, you're already on day 5. When I woke up, the forest was silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt hollow, like the sound had been scraped out of the air and all that was left was emptiness. My head was pounding, my clothes were soaked with dew. I sat up, half expecting us to see Evan and Mia sleeping nearby. But the camp was empty, no tents, no backpacks, just the burned outline of the fire pit and the same blackened notebook on the stump, waiting for me. The date on the first page had changed. It now said, Day 5, only one left. The words weren't written in ink anymore. They were seared into the paper, like someone had pressed a hot knife through it. I shouted for the others until my throat burned, but the forest just swallowed my voice. Then I started walking. For hours I wandered in circles, at least it felt like hours. The light never changed, the sky stayed the same, dull grey. No sun, no direction. Every tree looked identical, every root twisted in the same pattern, like the forest was copying and pasting itself around me. At some point, I found a piece of fabric snagged on a branch. Mia's jacket. The sleeve was torn clean off, and the fabric was damp with something dark. Next to it, half buried in the moss, was her phone. It was dead, of course. But when I pressed the power button, for just a second, the screen flashed. A video file, time-stamped tomorrow. I hit play. The video started with static, then a shaky shot of the woods. Someone, maybe Mia, was running, breathing hard, branches snapping, heavy footsteps behind her. She turned the camera towards her face for a split second, eyes wide, mouth open, screaming something. But there was no sound, just the whistle. That same broken croon. Then the camera turned, showing a figure stepping out of the trees. Tall, still, blank face. And behind it, another one. And another. Until the whole screen filled with them. All perfectly still. All turning their heads towards the lens at the same time. The last frame before it cut out was me, standing behind her, expressionless, eyes black, whistling. I dropped the phone and ran until my legs gave out. When I fell, I hit something hard. Metal. I brushed away the dirt and saw the glint of red paint. It was the hood of Evan's car, buried up to the windows in the ground, like the forest had swallowed it whole. Inside I could see shapes in the foggy glass. Outlines of people sitting in the seats. I called their names, pounding on the door. No one moved. Then I saw it, scratched into the windshield from the inside. One word. Run. I backed away, tripping over a root. The ground underneath was soft, spongy, and when I looked down, I realized it wasn't soil. It was hair. Human hair. Dozens of strands, woven into the dirt like grass, stretching out in every direction. That's when I heard it again. The whistle. Close. So close I could feel it vibrating in my chest. I turned, and there they were. Evan, Mia, Tyler, all standing at the edge of the clearing, half shrouded in fog. Their eyes were hollow, their skin pale, greyish, like wax figures left in the sun too long. They didn't blink, they didn't breathe, they just stared at me. Mia tilted her head, her neck creaking like old wood, and in that voice, the same broken rasp I heard outside the tent that first night, she whispered, "Stay with us." I stumbled backward, screaming, throwing anything I could. Rocks, branches, whatever I found. But they didn't move. They just stood there, whispering in unison. That same phrase over and over, until it turned into something else. Day 5 never ends. That's when I ran. I don't know how long or which direction. I remember the trees thinning, the light getting brighter, and then suddenly I was on asphalt. The road, the ranger station just a few hundred feet ahead. I must have passed out right there on the pavement, because the next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed. A ranger found me, wandering near the station at sunrise, clothes torn, dehydrated, covered in scratches. They said I was lucky to be alive. I told them my friends were still out there. They organised a search party that same day, but they never found them. No tents, no campfire, no car, Not even footprints. It was like we'd never been there at all. The rangers said Whistler Pines was officially closed years ago, after a forest fire destroyed the trails. But that's not true. I saw the signs, the old campsites, the cameras. Someone or something had been keeping that place alive. And the worst part, a few weeks after I got out of the hospital, a package showed up at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a memory card. When I plugged it into my laptop, there was one video file. The thumbnail showed me standing in the woods, looking straight at the camera. The file name was Day One. If you ever hear someone talk about camping near Whistler Pines, if you ever see a sign for it or hear someone whistle those 3 broken notes, turn around. Don't look for it. Don't go near it. Because it's still out there. Watching. Recording. Waiting for the next group to come along. And if you ever wake up in the middle of the night and hear someone gently knocking on your tent, don't answer. Just pray it isn't whispering your name.